This is a podcast where we talk filmmaking, from indie film to studio films to documentary to high-end TV and everything in between. How to get them made, how to make them, and how to try not to F it up, in a very, very humble opinion. Welcome to the show. This is another special. This is a Business of Film special. This is our 6th one, and I am delighted to say we are doing Horror Movie Report Special, or a Horror Movie Report Special. On the show, I have some very special guests. I think we should say hello first, and then I'll introduce you. Stephen Follows. Hello, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's so nice to be back and talking about one of my favourite topics. Also, one of my close friends is also on the podcast. Not that you're not a close friend, Giles, but it's nice to bring as many.
No,
this is a takeover, basically. Knowing that Dom and Phil aren't looking, I'm sort of moving in as many of my friends as possible. But you can stay, Giles. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. This is Jennifer Handorf. She is joining as well. Hello.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Welcome to the Filmmakers Podcast. We're popping your cherry on the Filmmakers Podcast.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. First time here.
And I love that. Let's start off with some of your credits so people know how fabulous and wonderful you are and how you are right for this specific episode. You're a director and a producer. You've made the movies Prevenge, The Devil's Business, The Chamber, and The Forgotten. Also, The Borderlands, lots of movies with that in the title. Native, who Daniel Fitzsimmons and Rupert Graves have been on the podcast chatting about that fabulous film. The Watcher in the Woods. And
also, can I just say also that Jen always leaves off what I think is one of the most impressive things that on her CV, which is that the very first short film she ever made won an Oscar.
It won the Student Academy Award. It's so qualified feeling. It's such a strange thing to refer to. I'm actually, I was excited. I was a juror on the Student Academy Awards this year, and they're actually having the ceremony in London. So I'll get to live my best Student Academy Award life this weekend. I'll have done the full circle now.
That's so cool.
Thanks for the big up, Stephen. I appreciate that.
That's really cool. Yeah, you should definitely not miss that one out. That's great. Winning an Oscar in any kind of way is brilliant.
I mean, it's terrible for a career path trajectory.
Yeah, if you look at the statistics, it doesn't bode well. I remember when we were longlisted, my co-awardee and I looked at all my co-awardee, the director on the project, Mim Olsen, he and I were looking up previous winners to sort of assuage our fears about like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Like, it's like, if we don't get it, we don't get it. It's fine. It's not. And the statistics were not grand for what they went on to do. And I think it's a thing, isn't it? The Oscar curse. When you look at people, it has a strange inverse impact. And I think that's true of a lot of these pieces of information, that if what you assume would be the case from a culture is not always what's reflected in the numbers. And I think it's something that Stephen has really brought to light. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
and I've worked very, very hard to make sure I don't achieve anything. So
you have.
I don't fall foul of the same pit that Jen is currently sitting in.
my success. It's lonely here at the bottom. Yeah,
just with your Oscar. Yeah, it's lonely.
Just me and Oscar hanging out at the bottom of a pit, putting the lotion on our skin.
All the tiny violins go mad for you. Yeah, but it's true. And the other reason why, not only those movies fantastic and very horror related, Jen is also a consultant in horror movies. She knows her shit, so do reach out to her should you need a consultant, which I think everyone does in life. Oh, just so you can see her polish her Oscar, which I think
which is not a euphemism.
It's not, by the way. Do you have it with you there? Can I see it?
It's not in this room, I'm afraid. It's in a different room. We've got my husband, who's a special effects artist, so for physical effects for film. He actually won the Canadian Academy Award last year, and so we put them all in the same shelf at the office. So you got to stack them up. Like, you've got to make it look like you sort of really care, but also don't care at all, because that's really chill and cool. It's in the same display case as the piece of the brick from the chimney from Evil Dead, from the cabin in the woods. So with all of our precious things, precious
things, that is kind of cool, very cool. And also to run you down Stephen's amazing list of very cool credits. His script writing has won the Virgin Media Shorts, the Reed Film Competition, IVCA Awards. He's been nominated at the BIFA Awards and longlisted for a BAFTA. He's an established data researcher in the film industry, hence why I'm here today talking about his horror movie report. You can find so much information about Stephen at stephenfollows.com. There's pages and pages of filmmaking fun, facts and figures, which is so important for you as a filmmaker. He's also taught at major film schools, and he's made the feature films Baseline and The Grind, as well as over 100 short films. He's also the host of the podcast Show Me the Money and authored by AI. And he's also a Guinness World Record holder adjudicator, and the new book is out now. Anything you want to add to that acclaimed list? Any Oscars hiding in the background there?
I think it's a bit gaudy to flash them the way Jen does.
I agree. Totally agree.
I'll say no, and I think we all know what that means.
I am Giles Alderson. I'm a director and producer, screenwriter. I have made the films Wolves of War, Arthur and Merlin, Knights of Camelot, and also The Stranger in Our Bed. I've produced Repeat and 3-Day Millionaire and the horror films Followers and A Serial Killer's Guide to Life. I produced both of them, and my debut movie, which I also wrote with Johnny Grant, which I directed, called The Dare, at New Buena Studios for Millennium Pictures. As it's coming up to Halloween, why not go watch any of those now, or any of the fellow hosts' films? They're all on Netflix or Amazon, Sky, whatever, right now. I forgot some of my credits. I don't know what they are. I was trying to read them and I actually don't know. Tried to do it in order. But anyway, I've made horror films as well. And I also feel like I am probably able to talk about this subject too in some way. Thank you for joining us. This is, like I say, the 6th one. These Business of Films, we go in depth into facts, figures. Stephen is the ringmaster, the leader, the man qualified to talk about these type of things. And we, I don't know about Jen, but I kind of bumble along and try and make fun of this. No, and I try and make sense of this, should I say. So, Stephen, do you just want to run down what the report is about?
Yeah, definitely. So I've spent the last year or so looking at horror films through as many different lenses as possible. And the end result is the horror movie report. And it comes in 2 flavors. There's a film fan version, which is just all the cool graphs and charts and descriptions. And like, that's really cool if you're into horror. But probably the version that the audience that are listening to this probably want is the Film Pro version. And I've done everything I can to try and help filmmakers arm them up to do what they need to get done. So there's stuff in there about profitability, budgets, all the data is Excel spreadsheets that you can play with. There's a couple of bonus reports around film festivals and how to write a business plan for a horror film. And also includes a license you can use the material in your business plans and stuff. So I can't guarantee that I can raise you money, but I can definitely help supercharge your business plan with some data and some facts so that you can push through when people tell you things that aren't true and be like, no, this is the case here. So yeah, horrormoviereport.com, and I've priced it so it's really affordable to filmmakers, and I'd love to hear how everyone uses it because it's been such fun to research.
A link to that is in the show notes. It's available now. Thank you for that, Stephen. So there's topics we're going to discuss today. We're not obviously going to do the whole report because we'd be here for days and days and days and days. So we're going to take little bits from it and discuss them. Some of these will be what defines a horror movie, the subgenres within that, the cost to make horror movies. Where does the money go? And branding your film and marketing, titles, how important is that? And profitability and the revenue streams, where do they go? Where do they sit, the horror movies? And the reality behind actually making a movie, when you should think about starting any kind of movie, but in this case, horror movies. All that's to come on this week's episode of the Filmmakers Podcast. Oh, we also do a bit of a quiz as well. Not really. I'd say we might do a bit of a quiz. If so, Jen's probably going to win.
The fire has gone out of it for me when I can't prove that Phil's wrong. I know. When he's not here, it's just not as much fun. Yeah. I don't know what it is about Phil, but I like him guessing.
Let's dive straight in with this because I think it's so important for horror filmmakers, genre filmmakers out there to understand what kind of film they're making, why they're making it, what's the audience. Don't just randomly go make a horror film. Maybe think about why. Is there a slasher in there? Is there a serial killer? Is this set in a house? Is it set in a swimming pool? These are all things we're possibly talking about and why. So where should we start?
I wonder, I mean, one of the things that in doing this report, I was surprised by myself, but also in talking to other people, a lot of people seem to be surprised how many horror films are actually made. So I don't know if you guys have a sense, and the audience as well, just having a think about how many feature films that are horror films, let's say that are on IMDb. That's probably an easy way of that were made last year. What do you reckon? What's the scale?
What, of how many horror films were made in the year 2023?
Let's do that.
I feel like I'm going to give a massively skewed number, but maybe that's part of the fun. Are we talking worldwide as well?
Yeah,
we always define this, Jen. By the way, we start off. I think, and then we go, hang on, does this mean? Yeah, and how many? Yeah,
I want to say 800 because I know that there's a lot of very, very small horror films that are made every year. And if we're talking internationally, I think there's a lot we don't know about. But I feel like I'm jumping the gate there a little bit. So
800 horror films made in the UK.
No, worldwide.
No,
worldwide.
Worldwide.
No, not in the UK.
I think it's a lot more than that. I think it's I think there's 800 maybe just made in the UK. I think there's way more than that made in the UK. I don't know why. I feel like you said it's been a year for people to go out there and make films. Or 2023. I think it's well in the thousands, Stephen. Worldwide. I'm going for 3,500.
3,500. Well, I think Jen is closer, but both of you are wrong. Which is perfect. Which is exactly how you want to kick these things off.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, it's interesting that we look at the numbers because in the 80s it was 150, say, a year. It wasn't worldwide, and considering how hard it was to make a film, that kind of makes sense. And then we started to see a rise in, say, 2000 was around 250 a year. But then by 2010, it was near Jen's number. So it was almost 800 made in 2010. But in the last couple of years, we've had over 1,500 a year. So that's a huge amount. Like I don't think you could watch them all back to back. And also, what kind of life would that be? But it's just the volume, and it's partly obviously because filmmaking is so easy to make now. You know, most people have access to a smartphone that has 4K, and there's distribution methods. But not only has the number of films gone up, it's gone up in all genres, but horror has been increasing its market share amongst other genres. So horror is supercharged within a supercharge. So we're in a huge boom at the moment of horror films being made.
I think the thing that blows me away the most about that is that so what did you say, 1,500? So generously, if we say it takes a month of production to make a horror film, which the over under all that is probably fair enough. It's probably longer than that, the average. Let's do bad maths and say 100 productions working at any given month to be able to make that possible. That genuinely that's bad math. It's higher than that, the number that we're talking about, really. But if you consider that at any given moment there are 100 crews around the world making a horror film, and that actually it's a higher number than that, that to me is baffling, because it's hard work. There's limited number of crew, and there's a limited number of ideas, and so, yeah, I think that's really incredible that it's actually grown to that number. And yet I was at the production film market last week, and people are still saying that they're always looking for horror films. So isn't it a funny little thing?
Isn't it? That's so fascinating. I was way off, by the way.
I like your enthusiasm, though. Maybe you're just seeing into the future.
I was just seeing worldwide, and I thought, I don't know why. I just went, there must be that many being made in the UK. But now you put it like that, absolutely, totally makes sense. And I need to get my head in the game and think about it. If I'm going to win
Come
this,
on, Giles.
I know.
You're letting yourself down. No. But it may not. I mean, who knows whether the growth will start to plateau? It can't keep going on forever. But
or can it?
Certainly.
There is so many platforms out there that are, like you say, you've just said, Jen, people are looking for horror movies. They're saying, we need more horror. Are they saying we need good horrors?
Well, because always,
that's defined. You know what I mean? Where is the line there in terms of good horrors and get horrors that get made? Because, like you say, it is easy now to pick up your iPhone and shoot something, and the length doesn't have to be over 90 minutes either to define.
No, certainly
a feature
not.
film.
And I think even and I'm sure, Stephen, you have some figures to support this, but I think even lower than 90 minutes you can get away with fairly regularly. I think it's like 82 to 84 minutes something is actually, and not being funny, 6 minutes is 2 days worth of shooting. That's real schedule, that's real budget, that's real time. I think Host was in 23, or was it 22, Jed Shepard's movie, and that was
I think it was a lot less than 80. I believe it might have been really.
The format on that was interesting as well, though. I would definitely say, because it had that Zoom structure, and if you've got the free Zoom, what does it kick you out at? 45 minutes?
Something
so
like
I think legitimately the vernacular of that style of filmmaking meant that an audience was happy to sit, they were happy for it to be a shorter experience because they are used to sitting on a Zoom chat for about that long, a little bit over an hour.
I thought you were saying they were saving money making the film on the free account.
I mean,
wow, she's really that is low budget filmmaking to the extreme.
That's all. I think I would love to know whether or not they actually even use this off. But yeah, anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
So on that I've done 3 episodes with that team actually, and they shot on iPhones which were clamped to their laptop screens to make it look like they were shooting via Zoom, but they actually filmed it, as in they rehearsed it on Zoom because that's what they were.
Because that's that there was a Zoom aspect. That's really interesting.
Well, I think the length of movies was defined by like cinemas and what they needed, and the medium changes the message, and it changes what the art can be. So when we have things that are streaming, the length is irrelevant to us and to the streamer, really, other than total minutes, but they don't really care. And then TV, they want certain slots, but the biggest slot for horror films is about 90 minutes. And so once you add a few adverts or whatever, or you got credits, that's also fine. And so there is no reason that they have to be 3 hours. If they can get in, to your life, deliver what you want to see and then get out, I think most people would appreciate it. I mean, how many movies have you seen that you've said, this is too short? And conversely, how many have you seen that have said this is too long?
Many.
And so, which is all of them. Yes, exactly. And so it's interesting because horror has its own lexicon. And I think that certain kind of dramas would struggle at 90 minutes because they want to do long moments, whereas horror wants to be, really excite you. And there's a certain amount that you just can't. I mean, imagine a car chase lasting 80 minutes.
Well, adrenal fatigue, isn't it? It's literally how much adrenaline, cortisol, how much do you have in your system before it all just sort of mutes out and you just sort of disassociate into, we get films like Salo that are horrific and grotesque and still on the top 100 horror films ever made from Variety's release list last week. Wow. But I think for a lot of people, they can't watch it because it just sort of becomes background noise after a while. And when you've got something that's so based on the audience's experience, I know we're going to talk about genre in a moment, and I was thinking about how, a comedy is a comedy from its script. You write a comedy, but a horror film is a horror film based on the audience's experience. And the number of scripts I read where it will describe something as terrifying or frightening or a character is feeling fear, it doesn't happen in the script. It happens in the theater or in the living room with the audience. And I think that's something that makes horror different from other primary genres, because let's throw into the mix the confusing fact that sometimes horror films are referred to as genre films with a capital G on their own, just not to confuse the issue at all. But yeah, I think it's what sets it apart from things like an action film. You write an action scene, an action scene is an action scene on the page. You do not know a scene is scary until you're watching it in a room with people.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I would say that in the studying of the numbers behind horror, you sort of sometimes get surprised and then you're, that makes complete sense. And I was looking at the average shot length, how long an average shot is between two edits. And horror has by far and away the longest shots. It's nearly 16 seconds on average across all horror films that I studied and all that. Wow. And at the other end of the spectrum is like action, sci-fi, adventure. Action has 4 seconds. Yeah, bam, bam, bam. Yeah. And it's made in the edit and it's made in the sound mix.
She loves tension, baby. Horror loves that tension.
And holding, and that's exactly what you're saying, Jen. It's about the audience not being able to look away because you're holding the camera on their face, on their point of view. You're not letting that tension go. And so it clearly is made in the experience, the interaction with the audience. And also if you've been holding that tense moment for 80 minutes, you're done. I'm out. I've had enough, thank you.
It's absolutely the case. There's a reason stand-up sets start as 5 minutes and that at a maximum you get an hour-long special, right? It's because people can do one note of emotion for a period of time. For whatever reason, action films seem to not follow this rule. Action films seem...
They're fireworks shows.
Yeah,
they don't care.
it just goes... Like, it's boom, and here's another thing. Boom, and here's another thing.
Well, I suppose you don't have to sometimes think too much when you're watching an action. You sort of go, well, okay, we're going to get... during this big action sequence, I don't need to follow a plot necessarily.
Yeah, that's it. You can turn your head off.
You can turn your head off for a bit and decide whether you should tune in or not. And I think, but you're right with this fatigue thing. And I think that's why horrors you can't be slashing someone the whole time. You can't be scaring someone the whole time because you know, I'm not scared anymore. And I think that's why, peaks and troughs. And I think that's why the Blair Witch and Paranormal did so well, because they held that tension to the moment of release. And if you keep doing that every 4 seconds like an action movie, people are going to go, I can't stop, turn on.
Well, and you notice like the best, and I think a lot of like Asian action films in particular do this, but the best action films have those really like after an action scene, they've got a really slow dialogue scene where like Mel Gibson is in his trailer with his dog on the beach and it just lets your like dopamine. I think I'm a big believer in our brain chemistry in response to storytelling and how that interacts, because you are effectively experiencing something emotionally and chemically within your body that's not happening. And I think the reason we enjoy it is because it feels like it's happening, because our cortisol or our dopamine or whatever doesn't know it's not, right? It's the same as it's the same. And I think something that's really interesting with action is it's dopamine reliant, isn't it? So it's the same thing that keeps you scrolling Instagram is the same reason that you can have a 3-hour long action film is because with very little recovery, you could be right back in there eating it up. Whereas with horror films, where the experience is genuinely depleting of you, there really is only so long, not only that you want to be there, but that you need to be there to experience the fullness of that emotional experience.
Yes, agreed. Well, let's talk about what defines a horror movie then, because we kind of touched on that and the subgenres within that.
Well, I mean, what is horror is something that all genre, the system we use for genres is broken anyway, right? Yeah. So like comedy is how you feel, family is the audience, you've got Western, which is the setting, which is sort of like war as well. Drama is not a genre, it's the absence of genre. And 60% of films on IMDb are listed as a drama, so it's not functionally useful. And then you've got ones that are depending on which country you're in. So animation in America is almost a synonym for kids, whereas in the UK, in Europe, it's not the case. That doesn't mean that. It's a production technique. So I came into doing all this horror stuff knowing that it was already a bit broken, and the more you look at genre, the more you're like, this isn't great. It's useful as a consumer, but it's not useful data. But horror has this extra level of like, I mean, there's so many fringe cases.
It's so debatable.
It's what's so much fun because it's different for everyone. And I found it the most acute at the highest end of film. So when I started looking at the Oscars, like how did horror fare at the Oscars, which, by the way, shorthand, the spoiler, not well, it became really important what a horror film is. Because if I'm looking at like 27,000 films, there'll be some on the fringe and it doesn't matter too much. But when you're looking at something with such a small data set, and then a small number of questionable horrors, we'll call them, have done incredibly well at the Oscars, it really matters. So here's my next quiz for the two of you. Okay. Which films have done well at the Oscars, we can do that broadly, as in been nominated or whatever over the years, that arguably are horror films or not, as in sit somewhere on that arguable line?
How many?
Or just name some.
Okay.
Just if you can each, it's hard.
Is Rosemary's Baby on there? I feel like
it is. I'd say that's horror, but you're right, totally right. That is one on there. I'm thinking ones that fall into other genres, maybe. Anyway, go what you're doing.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that could be on the softer side of horror, on the edge of it.
The other one is probably Silence of the Lambs.
That's a major one. That's a huge one. That one's so many like nominations and wins, and yet IMDb doesn't call it a horror film. So,
but it is a horror film. I mean, it's for me, it's
a thriller.
I mean,
I can't just argue.
So it's the supernatural element that, because I was going to say, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is another one.
Yes.
Or even, and Psycho sort of veers the other direction where it's a horror, but it has no supernatural elements. It's just got someone who's decidedly creepy. And sometimes we, like with American Psycho, being creepy and obsessed with death is enough to make it a horror film. Whereas,
well, what about The Sixth Sense?
Yeah, that's
movie.
Clearly a horror.
Ghost movie, but not horror movie.
Oh, you
well,
see,
I mean,
I'd say horror.
it's a ghost drama.
It's a drama that'll never sell.
All right, I got two more to have like arguments in pubs with.
Yeah.
Black Swan.
For me, it's definitely a horror movie, but I think one of the reasons why it's debated is that it's a horror film very much from the female perspective. And so traditionally we're used to painting that as a drama rather than a horror film. Because when you go to Baby Jane as well, that's not a dissimilar situation where it's or like Lady in the Cage, like very female experience based on it. Even films like Copycat, which is very thriller.
Great film, that. Sigourney Weaver, right?
Oh man,
yeah.
I always go back to that one.
I haven't watched that since I watched it first time when I was about 17.
Good.
Oh.
Treat yourself.
I will.
All right,
So,
one last one. IMDb
yeah.
does not call Jaws a horror film. Is it a horror
It's a
film?
political commentary on what happens when the economics of small town tourism overrun the value of human life.
Jen, that's not a genre. That's a plot summary. We've had this conversation.
I love it. Well,
I'd say
too,
yes, it's a horror.
The thing as well with genre is that we're talking about whether or not it's being used by a critic or by a financier or by a distributor or by a marketing team. That it's every time it's described, there's a different priority there. And I know that, one aspect that I find particularly interesting is the way that marketing departments are terrified of a funny horror film. And most horror films are actually funny. Hilarious. But the second you start to tell people it's funny, then it's a comedy horror, or as distributors and sales agents refer to them, a pudding. Because they don't know how to, they're like, wait, we don't know how to present this to an audience. It's too confusing. It's neither here nor there.
Oh, I see.
And that the idea that a film not fully representing a single genre somehow instantly makes it a bad film is really the only reason I think these genre distinctions have developed, because horror films have had to prove I'm not a pudding. I'm very clearly this, and this is how you will sell me to the audience. Because the subgenres are insane, right? Like how many subgenres did you designate, Stephen?
Well, I struggle because at some point you're talking about subgenres within subgenres, and you're also then talking about a small number of films. But I decided on 11. But there are some like found footage, which is a technique, but also has its own style and set of tropes. But I went 4, and I think these are in order of the ones at the top are the most frequent ones. So as we go down the list, we get to smaller categories. So I got psychological, supernatural, survival, slasher, monster, torment, gothic, gore, body, and found footage. Oh, and then a post-apocalyptic, which is the ones, found footage and post-apocalyptic are the ones that are the most questionable as to whether they're just subsets.
Because they could really be existing at the same time as one of the other ones, right?
But and there's not loads of them. But I went through it and I thought, no, actually, because obviously 11 is a very unneat number. Who wants a prime number on a list, right? And so I did go back and interrogate it. I took them off a few times. I was like, no, actually, I can see that what they're delivering to the audience, what you might buy when you're buying a movie in the, physically buying it or just turning it onto stream, is actually an emotionally different experience. If you're looking for a psychological horror film or a slasher film or a body horror, these are different experiences. And I think post-apocalyptic, because I realized I wouldn't watch some post-apocalyptic if I was in a gloomy mood,
not putting on threads in that instance.
Exactly. And there are times, and I realized, well, that makes it an interesting thing to study. And also, as we talked about, many films fall into multiple categories. So this is not exclusive. Most horror films are to some degree psychological. Supernatural itself is huge and has overlap with things like, a lot to do with torment and things like that as well, and monsters and things.
And I would argue that it's really difficult to put any horror movie into one of those categories. And I think this must have been so difficult for you to try and do that because...
Well, I put it in multiple categories exactly for that reason, because it's just... Yeah, it's multiple, and sometimes it's one more than the other. But it doesn't. What, as Jen was saying, it doesn't really matter what we label it. We need to know these labels to do the maths and to think about how we're going to learn from previous films. But at the end of the day, all of that has to just be on advice. And at the end of the day, you say, okay, well, here's a pretty precise graph, but is it accurate to the film you're making? And that's why I think, and I say this about all the data work I do, you should absolutely pay attention. You should have a look, and then you should forget what's there and do what you think is best. In the same way, that's how you write a good script, right? You read Save the Cat and you read Story and you do all of that, and then you're like, okay, I'm just going to do what I need to do, because the right stuff seeps into you, and then you also let go of making a formulaic thing that someone else has made.
So true. However, I would argue that I think it is important that you know what your genre is here. And the reason why I say that is because you've got to sell the movie afterwards. So if it's fine to say, oh, it's a mashup of all of these movies, however, your sales and distribution team want to put it in a box. There's a film we're in festivals right now with called Dirty Boy, and it's not a horror. It's not an outright horror, but labeling it as a folk thriller does not work for our sales and distributors. And you can say it's a horror thriller, which we are doing, but that's why I think it's quite important to know that going in when you're writing it, or certainly when you're ready to make it, that you know what kind of a movie it is, or at least what movie you're going to be telling people it is. Jen, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the reason people find this so difficult is that, one, I think the word genre has been used and reused and transformed in this to where I don't think people are ever talking about the same thing. When you've got three people talking about genre, you could have three totally different conversations and not realize it's happening. But I think if people, marketing, filmmakers, everyone, reflected on it existing as a description of the audience's experience, and what I am selling you is, if you buy a ticket to this film, you will have this emotional experience. And I think if we reflect on it as that, it becomes much easier to see what we're all talking about. And the reason the filmmakers need to know it is because they all need to be on the same page about what they want their audience to experience. The reason the marketing team needs to know it is because they need to sell the audience what this experience is going to be like. The problem happens when not everybody experiences a film the same way. So you've got your intention, what you intend for the majority of people to feel from it. But then actually as individuals, it's why, did that film thrill you? Did that film arouse you? Did that film, what did you get from it? Is absolutely, again, it's three different conversations. So, I think that in the first instance, if we all can just agree that when we say genre, we're not talking about the type of film, we're talking about a description of the audience's emotional experience of the film, I think that would clarify things for a start. But then we just have to accept that because it's an experiential definition, it is going to be different from individual to individual.
Yeah.
Can I ask Jen as well, because you're very much in the horror community, much more than I am, as in I sort of do the stats on the outside, but you know all the intricacies and all the gossips. If you could spill some tea, that would be great. Do the people within horror who like one over the other, the body horror folk versus the supernatural folk, what's the social hierarchy here? Who's the mimes? Who's the legitimate theatre? Like who are the ones that are like, oh yeah, we're into body horror, but they don't like anything with blood in it, so they're not real horror fans.
You know what? I would almost say the great thing about horror fans is it doesn't exist as that tiered system. I think really, probably the outliers are, because there are some very unpleasant extreme violence against specific social groups in some horror films. I think everybody knows it's a red flag if somebody's entire subset of favorite films all demonstrate violence against one cultural group. But I think as far as what people enjoy, I think one of the things that makes the horror community so interesting is that we're all just excited to be involved. And that if one person loves body horror and the other person loves slashers, I mean, maybe they've got less to talk about, but it doesn't mean that one's interests are more valued than the other. I think, you've got everything from John Carpenter and Wes Craven in the sort of more poppy area to, Dario Argento and chroma key 70s slashers. And there's space for all of it to exist, I would say.
I agree, and I love the horror community. It's an amazing opportunity for filmmakers, I think, especially if that might be your first film, because it's as we'll touch on, it's a lot of people's first film, and there's reasons for that we'll probably come on to. And the community is incredible. It really is. They will really love your film, whether they love that genre.
Someone will. Someone will.
That's the thing. Someone will love your film and champion it because you've given them something, and especially if it's new or fresh. But also just because you have done it, you've actually gone and made a film that people will watch. Especially if you get into the festival, the Fright Fest, etc. People do love them. It's quite amazing, and it's quite a wonderful community to be involved in. I definitely say I don't think there's many other genres that really have an amazing community like the horror community.
There is that really strong, vibrant community, which I don't think exists, as you were saying, Giles, to any other genre. And I think also it helps the art because they're much more forgiving. And one of the things that is really interesting and that got me interested in studying horror to start with is if you look at the correlation between the scores that critics give movies, so like Metascore, and then you correlate that with profitability across loads of movies. And you're basically saying, and this is very loose language, but you're kind of saying, do better films make more money? Like if a film is better, does it make more money on average, whatever? And the answer is yes for all genres, and it's pretty high, except horror, where it's functionally irrelevant.
Right.
It just doesn't matter.
It's one of the most interesting things, I think, about, and I think independent film in particular works this way, is that very rarely is it the quality of the filmmaking or the quality of the audience experience that makes people go buy it and go watch it. It's about how the film has been marketed, which is why, going back to genre again, it's why it has to, if you want your film to be successful, that has to be clear. Not if you want your film to be good. If you want your film to be successful, that has to be clear, because it's how they get butts and seats. And if they don't know how to do that, then what are they going to do? It's why high concept is such a hallmark of films that people want to buy. High concept doesn't mean your film is better. It means it's easier to communicate what it is, and it's easier to sell. That's all it means.
So true. So let's, if we can, talk about, from that list of subgenres and genres that you discussed there, and we have touched on, which one is the most profitable?
Well, I think the thing is, whenever I can give you an answer, but whenever we look at these kind of things to do with profitability, we have to remember that we're looking at certain subsets of films. So it's all films that have reached cinemas, and then it's which is already filtering. So I think it's found footage. Found footage films are within the subgenre of horror films, the ones that have the highest profitability. But that's partially a function of the best ones are getting through. If you look at the biggest horror films, so let's move to budget scale now. The largest horror films, almost all of them are reaching cinemas because they can't afford not to. And also they have all the backing of people. And if it was a bad idea, it would have been presumably filtered out. If it was unmarketable, it would have been filtered out earlier in the process. Whereas when you've got a low budget found footage type film where it's just a bunch of kids have gone, let's just go make this, and they've just thrown their passion into it, of course it's more likely to fail because it didn't have the same starting point. That doesn't mean it's inherently worse, or that if you go off and make one, so it is found footage, but I don't think that says go make them for dollar. But overall, horror is the most profitable of all of the major genres, the most likely to break even and make a profit, which is the highest goal for all filmmakers, right?
Yes.
Not to lose their dime.
Yeah, well, I think there's some industry, some standard knowledge that are givens within the film industry, and I think some of those were really beautifully reflected in the report. One of which is that horror films are the most profitable subgenre, genre. That you hear people talk about this a lot. I love that horror comedies don't sell was disproven in what's I've been telling people that ever since I read the report, that, well, you can say with your mouth that horror comedy doesn't sell, but actually that's not what the statistics tell us. But
eat my graph.
Eat my graph. Yeah, exactly. I love that. I might actually make a shirt that says "Eat my graph." Put that on it. I love that.
Damn it! I've lost another tag.
I know. I'm collecting them. There's some word clouds in this horror report that I really want to be made into activewear. But one of the other things I think that has been general assumed knowledge is that horror films don't actually need a star to be profitable. And again, that's something that the report bears out. And I think, you can see how the industry has reacted to that kind of information when you get companies like Blumhouse who say, well, what if we take a genre that doesn't need a store to work? We only distribute the good ones and we put a star in them. And it's an absolute slam dunk genius business model. And we see that bear out time and time again, that if you start with a pretty good idea, put a bankable actor in it, make it for a low budget, and then only put marketing behind it if you actually believe it's a quality film that the audience is going to engage with, you have a studio, right? You have like the genre studio that's able to reliably create films almost in response to this industry knowledge that reflects these out, this data that Stephen has put together here. I think it's a fantastic example of the work in practice.
Yeah, we need one in the UK. I mean, it's great what Blumhouse is doing. It's fantastic what he's done and the team have done. However, wouldn't it be great if we had a house like that in the UK as well?
Yeah, there's no development money in the UK, which is a huge problem. And it's why it's a constant source of conversation for all small independent production companies, which is that if you were actually willing to give us more money in development, we would be able to give you a stronger, more commercially reliable body of work that could grow. But it's the same reason that BFI doesn't love funding horror films, is because there's this sort of we've always done it this way kind of behavior around things. But
I wonder if that'll change, because I mean, when we were talking at the top about there are so many more horror films and also the market share is changing, I think some of that is in the audience changing and things like that. But also there is much more of an acceptance of horror. So if you go back to the 80s, there was lots of like, oh, this is not a horror, it's a psychological thriller, or the horror was seen as like the video nasties, the VHS copies that you bought under the counter, or and I think that it's evolved to the degree to which now that some critics talk about elevated horror, like The Lighthouse. Oh, this is horror, but I'm not like the people who like dirty, not dirty horror. Yeah. No, this is sophisticated. I can write about it in The Guardian, and my dinner parties. And they love
to say torture porn as well, which is this horrible,
dismissive kind of.
Yeah, absolutely,
exactly, and letting go of the nuance of all of it, and so I think that's shifting is my point, and I think that the kids that grew up on like loving horror are now running studios and a proper full-grown adults, or at least older, maybe not mature, but maybe just older. And I think so. It might be interesting to see whether, because public funding has always been one of the laggards, one of the last parts to actually catch up with these things. And it might well be that we start to see all public funding bodies accepting horror and not feeling like it's ashamed or less than. I mean, Australia's got some really interesting space there as well. And I don't know, like it would be interesting to see, but certainly horror is the genre that under-indexes on public funding to a crazy degree, especially considering how much people want to make it.
Yes.
Going again back to the production finance market at London Film Festival, the Adrian Wooten, who's head of Film London, was saying, it looks like the UK could actually become the home of horror with the tax credit that's come up, with the crew that we have here, with the track record of writers that we have here, with our, co-production treaties with other countries, all of this, that we have everything in our DNA to do that. And it will, time will tell whether that bears out over the next couple of years.
I would totally watch Broken Britain, the horror film. Like, I don't know. I remember, is it Eden Lake?
Eden Lake,
exactly. Eden Lake from like
Edith
10
Wharton
years ago.
Lake.
It was really great.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Because that was about like hoodies, wasn't it? Like, it was taking, and it was really great. I thought it was a really good film. But it was interesting that I thought that would kick off. At the time I watched it, I was like, oh, wow, great. So people have woken up to the thing that we've always long known about sci-fi and horror, that you can talk about something to do with, and I mean, you see that a lot more with like Jordan Peele and stuff like that, talking about other issues. And there must be some, I'm not saying there are none, but it just it didn't spark off what I thought it would personally. And so I'm still waiting for that bit where everyone goes, I've got something to say about Britain or life. Like, when's there going to be the horror film called Snatchers, where they take your phone on line bikes?
But it's about
I don't know what it will be.
The Tory party. No.
You see, the Tories. Wow. There we go. Tories is a good title for a horror film, and it's like
you could call it Notorious.
Yes. Oh, you see, this is what happens when you get geniuses in a room. I'll do the business plan. You two do all the hard bits. You do all the making of it.
So we've talked about sort of genre, their subgenre, sort of the patterns, why certain films might make more money than others. Let's talk about costs then. We touched on it briefly. Why certain films cost a certain amount, why we should be thinking about a certain amount when we're going into making our horror movies. Should we, when we're writing it, be thinking about our budgets? My answer is yes, but that doesn't mean the writer is thinking about that. Jen?
Well, I think again, there's some elements that make horror innately more affordable. We've already talked about the fact that you don't need a known cast in order to get them financed and profitable. They tend to have limited cast because things are scarier when you're alone than when you're in a crowd. You know, the rave scene from Blade 2, is it, being an exception, I suppose, but there are obviously some times when crowds are scarier. But so limited cast, less known cast, limited locations, because again we're talking about building tension within a space, and that if you're constantly escaping that space, then it doesn't feel the same kind of tension build up. You've got physical effects, which are long the bastion of horror film, rather than digital effects, which are expensive. There's something that about, obviously I'm slightly biased, but there's something about a physical effect, even if it doesn't look perfectly right, because it happens within the physics of a world that we believe, as opposed to computer-generated effects, which are happening in a generated physics that may or may not be accurate to the environment you're putting them in. There's something that we can get away with using physical effects on any budget to some extent. Like there's a load of films that come out that have totally unbelievable effects, but they're fun because there's a rompiness to it and an enjoyment in the audience experience and that sort of suspension of disbelief. We all made some kind of, hopefully make-believe games as children. We are all capable of imagining that something is something else and still enjoying it within that context. But there is something really off-putting about uncanny physics that makes that difficult. So actors, locations, oftentimes first-time filmmakers, so fees are lower. Oftentimes less experienced crew, so fees are lower. All of these things mean that these films are innately more affordable to make.
Completely. And also there's when it comes to the actual art, if the sound is a bit off or hard to hear, or if it's low light or it's shocking camera work, they can, I'm not saying they do, but they can contribute in the way that it wouldn't work for a Marvel film. And
the one thing I'm going to disagree with you on is sound. I think everything else can go in the toilet. And
agreed.
But sound is something that doesn't cost money. It takes time and talent. It doesn't cost someone more money to have a more creative, artful sound design that took 2 weeks. If you want it to take 10 weeks, and obviously the longer you have, the better it can be. But really, it's about understanding, again, tension and the use of tension. But sound design, I always say that great sound can save a terrible image, but a terrible sound can ruin a beautiful image.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, it's so important for me. It's one of the things we do talk about on the podcast a lot is the sound. It just makes someone watching it think this is a good movie or not, and it really is good. And I do believe that if the sound is terrible, you just instantly go, well, this film's shit. Well, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is. It's
this
really
is the thing, and I think where it is important to remember that sound is not about budget, is that if you're filming on an iPhone or filming on an Arri Alexa or 35 millimeter, you are paying a vastly different amount of money for the equipment, for the insurance, for the crew, for the amount of time it takes, for all of that. A 416 mic is exactly what everybody booms on. There is not a set that doesn't use a 416, same exact microphone, same exact higher costs, no matter whether you're recording Tom Cruise or, Tim from down the street. It's the same microphone. And it's the same editing software. It's all about the craft and the people who use it. And yes, if you have someone who's absolutely never recorded sound in their entire life, then you can be really stuffed when it comes down to it.
You've seen those behind the scenes images where there's someone who's clearly never held a boom in their life. They're stood in the corner like it's a sweeping brush. You're just like,
was just rubbing their hands on the
rubbing
boom
their
pole.
hands on it, keeping warm.
Yeah, and you know, I am not saying that there isn't a vast difference between a well-trained, experienced sound recordist and a newbie. There very much is. And what a well-trained sound recordist will give you is perfect sound. You don't have to ever ADR, you know, within the circumstances. But I recorded the sound on a short film I shot 2 weeks ago. Werner Herzog records all the sound on his documentaries, all on a 416 microphone. Everybody's shooting on this. So there's no excuse for your sound to be restricted by budget, is all I'm saying.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
You tell yourself, no one wants your college-era band tees. But on Depop, people are searching for exactly what you've got. You once paid a small fortune for them at merch stands. Now, a teenager who calls them vintage will offer that same small fortune back. Sell them easily on Depop. Just snap a few photos and we'll take care of the rest. Who knew your questionable music taste would be a money-making machine? Your style can make you cash. Start selling on Depop, where taste recognizes taste.
And I suppose then the other side of that is the camera and how it looks. And as you mentioned, Jen, it can, but it's okay if it looks shitty. It's okay.
We don't care.
We don't care. We actually don't care. And I love the study talking about practical effects. I try to get as many practical effects in all the movies I do, just because it's more fun to do, for one. You're not faking it with, you know, CGI. And it just, like, people will forgive you because you've made it's kind of like you've made the effort. You've gone, no, look. And when it works, oh my God, is it incredible? And everyone just goes, oh, wow. And it's such a better feeling than, oh, well, we just did it all in CGI, which we all know now can look really bad, especially on a low budget, which most horror movies have. Shall we talk? I know it's difficult to quantify, but let's just, if we can, talk about what people should be spending on a horror, or at least what the average is, or at least where we think people might be spending too much in an area here.
I mean, there's a few ways you can approach it. There's the one of how do you shoot the script? And then the other is the other direction, which is, well, what is it worth? You know, how much are you going to be able to sell it for? Yeah. And because it's asinine to say, but also true to say that any film can make money if it's made on a low enough budget, which is empty to say because, you know, like some films have a tiny audience, but the script demands a lot. But there is a lot of wiggle room in the middle. It's not that there is a natural figure for any film. Films can be interpreted in different ways. And so the real art of the producer is making those two ends meet, you know, being able to make it on enough that you can do it safely, but also in a way that's going to finish it to a professional level. And also at the other end, as low as possible, so that you've got the greatest chance of recouping and making another one and finding your audience.
I would 100%. And I think you can look at some of the industry knowledge that reflects that. I think that if individuals are going to go out and make, how much did Colin cost? What was the headline price on Colin? 37 pounds or something.
Sandwiches, basically.
Yeah. Colin, it was made on. Yeah, they said it was 30 quid. Yeah,
which is fine, and people were paying their own train fare, their own sandwiches to come volunteer and be on that film, and it made it, and it got to festivals because it's a quality piece of storytelling, but it will never be distributed theatrically because it will not generate enough money to justify that kind of return, which means that its potential is inherently limited. So if we're talking about at what budget level does a horror film stop having its profit potential limited by its diminished budget, we are legitimately looking at 1 to 3 million sterling. It's got to be of that level to have a chance at theatrical distribution. You know, we talk about films that play at Sundance and never have theatrical distribution. Again, I'm not talking about to be a good movie. I'm talking about to be a commercial film that has a chance of theatrical distribution that can then generate enough income to generate that return. And I think it's even probably too low as a minimum £1 million sterling. And I think you start to get into real film money at around 3 million is when you start to have A-list cast, or, you know, reasonable, what's considered A-list cast. My aunt in Arkansas needs to know who they are if you have more than a 3 million quid budget.
Oh, is she the arbiter?
Exactly.
Who was doing
it's
that?
It's really hard to get through because she's only got the landline.
Oh, she's doing so well.
Exactly.
When you do, her knowledge.
It's a different dynamic if you're talking about what do you need to make a good film. Your iPhone and your friends who you can direct. That's all you need. But if you want it to actually sell theatrically, it is a minimum. There is a minimum threshold of technical and able to be marketed. Like, they have to believe it can generate a minimum audience. And that the marketing is just to let the audience know it's happening. It's not to convince the audience to come see it. It's to make them aware it's happening so that they can come see it. So,
and this goes back to something that I think is really critical, especially, mostly when people are starting out in their career, is to understand why you're making this movie now. Because if you're doing it for fun, or you're doing it to because you want to do it, great. Ignore all of that and go and make it for fun. Make sure it's the most fun. Doesn't matter if people are paying their own train fares if they're happy. Go have a nice time, enjoy it and learn something. But if you are going, no, I'm going to raise money on this, I'm going to look somebody in the eye and say, give me some money because I'm going to give you a good chance of getting some back. You've got to take that kind of stuff really seriously and acknowledge, okay, maybe I can't get there. Maybe I need to have an interim step. Like, for example, maybe you make a short film like Smile, for example, hugely successful based on a short film. And so that self-knowledge of where am I, what can I do, what is actually out there is really important. And it comes down to, as I said, why this film? Why are you making this film now? And when you have that answer, you're able to say, okay, I will go and raise more. I won't raise more. I know my priorities.
I always ask this question when I'm consulting is whatever, because, you know, I'll work with totally brand new filmmakers who have written a script and just want to know, is it good or not? I don't even know if I'm going to try and give it to anybody. I just want a sanity check on it. And I've worked with people who they're producers and it's their first film and they want to make something really commercial and they need to make sure that it's going to be hitting that target audience. And the advice I would give those people is entirely different because there's no one wrong way to intend to make a film. But absolutely exactly what Stephen has said. You have to know why you are making a film. And if the reason for making it is at all engaged in capitalism, you have to accept that being good is not enough for it to be a commercially successful film.
It's so interesting. And it's basically saying, look, if you're going to go out there and make your film and you're going to make it for pretty much nothing, as they did with Colin, or you're going to make it for, you know, 100 grand, or less than $1 million, basically, know that that's going to be very difficult to get into cinemas, even if you do have a big name, because it is all about, people thinking it's bigger than it is. But isn't that a little bit depressing, because most of us make horror films when we start out for way under $1 million. You know, we don't even get anywhere near $1 million because we can't raise the money, because who the hell are we? We haven't made a film before.
Well, so this is the one thing I would jump on, and I think it's something that filmmakers could really do with understanding, is that in truth, raising 2 million quid is easier than raising £500,000. And what I mean by that is that the people you're going to raise the money, there are funding bodies in place that if you were making a 3 million quid with an actor in it, they will sign you a check for £500,000 right there. There is no funding body for a £500,000 film. There is, the BFI very rarely, they don't have microwave anymore. Like, they very rarely support that. Yes, you have access to the tax credit, but only in a limited way, and it costs money to achieve. You're looking at raising SEIS or EIS equity, and even that has a lot of thresholds you've got to jump through. So really what you're looking at is going door to door to people who probably don't have more than $1,000 to give you on a good day. So you are having to go to 500 doors, more than that. Let's say 2,000 doors to find the 500 doors. It's a hell of a lot easier to raise 3 million with a cast member in it. The problem is getting that cast member, and your script and the package you've put together has to be hot shit. to be able to access that cast member. And that's actually the hurdle that people don't realize they're facing. It's not harder to raise that money. It's harder to get the cast aboard when they don't know who you are or what you've done.
So
sorry,
insightful.
That's my little soapbox.
No, I love it. And it like you say, it's so important for filmmakers to know that. Accept where you're at the beginning. Know that getting that, you're a no-name person. Your script has to be exceptional. You have to be M. Night Shyamalan, with Sixth Sense, for someone to go, oh, okay, we will make this for 3 to 5, because he was no one at that point. Particularly, he had made another movie before that, but it certainly wasn't a horror in that sense. Stephen.
Yeah, so on that, I want. Sometimes when we're talking about this stuff, it can sound depressing. And part of me says, be depressed, because it'll only put off the people who aren't really committed anyway. And the ones that are committed are going to ignore it. And so, like,
yeah, of course they are. Go do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's,
my film's the one that's going to get
exactly. And that's a filter that should exist. We shouldn't be inspiring people.
And it's true. There is anomalies, Stephen. There is anomalies out there that do get through. We're talking average, aren't we?
Yeah. And so part of me thinks, we should go around depressing people, because it will be to some people, it's the right barrier. It's not one based on class or who you are. It's based on how much effort. But
delusion.
Delusion. Yeah. But
and that's a good thing to have.
Self-belief, I think we can call it.
Totally deluded making my first film.
What I would say on the other side, there is some inspiring stuff that I found in the numbers, which was, I was looking at whether it makes a big difference as to whether a horror film is directed by a first-time director, or a first-time writer, or a first-time producer. And by first time I mean first time they've had a movie credit. So they're not going to be fresh. Some of them will be fresh out of school, but some of them may have done TV or adverts or shorts or whatever. So it's not that they are completely nobody. But when you look at profitability and you correlate it with whether they had a first time director, producer, or a writer, it's almost irrelevant. It almost has no, and certainly if that's the only piece of information that an investor has about two projects, this is a first-time director, this one's not a first-time director, you don't have any information. It's not worth using that piece of information way above the commitment, the story, the ideas. But there was one element of the cast which did make a difference statistically, which is whether you have an experienced exec producer on board the project. And so, now I don't know which way around it is. I don't know whether exec producers are smart enough to find the good ones and jump on them and go, I made that, or whether they come on board your average project and make it one. And it's just that it's much more likely to sort of take off if you have an executive producer who's done this before.
I would go back to saying it's not about quality when it comes to commercial success, and that if you've got somebody driving the ship who has driven ships before, then they're not going to hit any rocks. Like it's they know how to, so that it's irrelevant whether it's a first-time director or not, because it actually impacts it less, the quality of it, the experience of it, the outcome of it, whether it is what people are telling you it's going to be, than it does having somebody who knows how to manage money, managing the money. Because it is, you do see, I've spoken to low budget filmmakers who were surprised that their feature film could qualify for the tax credit. And wow. So that's inexperienced happening. And that's one of the reasons they were 20% and now 40% nearly less profitable on their film. Whereas obviously an experienced executive is never going to leave that money on the table.
No.
They're going to know exactly what counts in the tax credit and what doesn't. So they're not going to run into those kind of pitfalls. The naivety of first timers getting into distribution deals where it's no MG up front, but a 50-50 split. That is a newbie offer that no one should take if they think their film has any profit potential. That is basically the same as no deal. And again, an experienced EP isn't going to accept that deal. So I would almost say that the reason it's financially successful is because someone who has experience with film finance is overseeing it. And film finance is a totally different beast to making a film. It's a completely separate wheelhouse skill set outcome.
Yeah. It's called show business for a reason, isn't it? Film business.
Not show friendship.
Exactly. And the film is making the film. The business is selling the film. It's selling. It's like anything, any product. You can go make a brilliant pot, but can you sell it? And that's the two different sides of that, which separates, I was trying to think of a good example. I went with Marks and Spencer's. Doesn't make any sense. But do you know what I mean? IKEA, they know how to make it and sell it. It's a very thing. And we as filmmakers do, which is what Blumhouse do very well. They know how to make them and sell them. And selling is where the money is. If you can't sell it, well, it doesn't matter how good your movie is or who's in it.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons short films aren't hugely profitable. There's a ton of absolutely amazing short films out there, but they're impossible to sell because audiences don't know what to make of them, and neither do marketing teams. So
there's no money in it. And
exactly.
You're doing it as a calling card. You're doing it to get your feature film made, if that's what you want to do, or TV series, whatever it is, documentary. That's what short films are amazing, but they're definitely a stepping stone. Let's talk about, we touched on their profitability, but let's come back to that in a minute. Let's talk about branding and marketing, which again, we've touched on again, and why that's really important. Posters, for instance, what's on it, what does well, what doesn't do well. Again, marketing your film as what genre we've talked about, but how does a poster and how does release strategy work within that?
Well, I think one of the things you've got to do is communicate so much of an emotional experience. So with a drama, you might be saying people are going to feel sad, or there's famous persons in it, or whatever. There's not a lot of information. Whereas when it comes to a horror, you have to try and make people feel the thing it's feeling, and it's really hard to do. But when it's done well, it's shockingly done well. So, for example, there have been posters. There's a poster for a film called Clown, Eli Roth's film from 2014, I think, and it was banned in Italy. And all it is a photo of a clown looking at you with menace and like this slightly disfigured face, but certainly not. I mean, you might, if you saw this person walking down the street, you might look at them twice, but you wouldn't be terrified by them. But it's such a terrifying poster. The poster was banned. Now, what an effective poster, or Smile, that has this sort of overly smiling, huge face. And like that conveys so much about the emotional promise of the movie, going back to what Jen was saying before, that is really good marketing. Whereas I see so many things where people have got like a film called The Tree, and there's a slightly spooky tree and with some fog around them. And they're like, and you're like, what are you conveying? What are you promising the audience?
I'm going to see a spooky tree.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not.
Tree.
You're not.
I mean, to some extent, that's almost The Conjuring, isn't it? I think is the spooky tree poster, and I think I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to. I think one of the reasons film marketing is so attracted to horror films is that they can just reuse old stuff, like the Borderlands that I produced, the found footage one, not the video game one, had a hilarious instance where our distributor actually used our cover art for another film.
With your permission?
Wow.
Or
No. They released 2 films with the same artwork. And
that's what bad luck. Honestly, you're doing that and then you think, oh, we've made this mistake and we used the wrong file. Oh, how embarrassing.
But it's not. No, it's literally not, because they have to put the name on it, and it's honestly, it speaks to, that's an extreme situation, but it speaks to the thought process. And the fact is, most of the time they're going to be using stock images that someone in the office, a graphic designer who is now working in film distribution, has layered up on their computer, that the head of distribution and sales has come over and said, oh, not like that, like this. Filmmakers do not understand that the success of their film is on the basis of making the marketing team's life as easy as possible.
Yes.
Because they are not there to make the best marketing plan for your film. They are there to finish work at 5 and make a marketing plan for the film that has been put on their desk.
Right. And if they've seen that film many times, or a similar film, they've probably not watched it. They've gone, well, we know it's got a person with a mask on it, so let's.
And if you've not provided stills, if you've just provided screen grabs, guess what? They're never going to use your screen grabs. If you've not had on-set photography provide stills, or you've not done a photo shoot, then they are going to be using stock footage to sell your film. How can your film stand out when it's being sold with stock footage?
And this goes on to title as well, where you can have such great titles. Things like The Purge is a great title for conveying information and whatever. And then there can be generic titles. And they're often in this point in the distribution process we're talking about, the distributor will retitle a film and call it something else. And if filmmakers don't want that to happen, come up with a better title first, because they're not doing it for fun.
It's honestly, I think if people start retitling your film, then you've got bigger problems. And what I mean by that is that if they are not confident in the title you've chosen, it means that they are not confident in your creative choices. And I say this as someone who has had films change their title for better or for worse. Like The Borderlands, hilariously, it was called Devil Lies Beneath for the entirety of its production, script stage, right through post-production. It got retitled Borderlands by the distributor. And then in the US, it got retitled Final Prayer. So there's not even the intercontinental cross-marketing of, I heard this film, The Borderlands. If you don't know it's called The Final Prayer, you can't even go look at it. Which is also just a terrible, really terrible title.
Terrible title, doesn't mean
anything. And nobody
anything.
asks you. It was in all of our agreements that we would be consulted on title changes. And in one of them that we were required to be consulted on title changes. Nobody's going to ask you unless you want to go actually sue a distributor because they didn't ask you. Then you just really, as Stephen says, you've got to have that best title from day one. And if people start asking you to change your title, then you are not generating the faith you need to be generating in them about your project overall.
And I think that when we get really close to it, we've worked for it for a long time, we put up with titles because they're familiar to us, or we feel we understand what it is. And it's amazing how far you can go. So it's really important to, before you realize that you've got a different impression, it's important to talk to other people about what they're picking up from it. And there's a story which I really like from John Carpenter. So he made Ghosts on Mars from 2001. And he thinks that it completely conveys the absurdist thing of it. He said, there's a quote from him that says something like, "It's called Ghosts on Mars, for Christ's sake. Why would people take this movie seriously?" And yet lots of people did take it seriously, because Ghosts on Mars is no less a silly idea than most horror films. And you can't start going, a purge? How would that possibly work with the paperwork? You know, a clown that lives in the sewer.
Logistics alone are
They
fabulous.
don't live there. They live in circuses. Like, so clearly for him, it was, yeah, exactly. For him, he was like, oh, isn't this a funny title? But no. And so Mars Attacks, not a horror film, but a good example. That could be a serious film about like, oh, Mars Attacks. But they've got a little exclamation mark at the end, which gives it a little wink of, and then
a wink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got to
Jaws,
listen to your
Jaws
audience.
is another title that before you knew shark movies were, Jaws could be anything.
Yeah.
What was it? There was James Bond, villains called Jaws.
Yeah.
Jaws meant something totally different, and that became shark related because of the title of the movie. If the film had bombed, no one would ever connect Jaws to shark movies.
But also, can we all just appreciate how bad Alien is as a title?
Terrible title.
Like, it's not a good title, but because it got there first and it managed, and that title treatment is iconic as well.
Silence of the Lambs. I mean, it's not hard to throw something and find, but something like The Sixth Sense it does convey the slightly spooky, weird.
Connect.
Yeah. So it's like, also you have to think about whether the audience are going to have marketing put in front of them beforehand or not. So when you go and see a film at a film festival, you know nothing about it. But when you go and interact with it in the world, it's probably been trailed. You've probably seen a poster. You probably know somebody that's in it, of them. And so it's that total package that makes up the communication. So if you don't have the marketing or the name or the, whatever it might be to convey it, your title is doing so much more work. Whereas if you have a studio film called Alien with someone famous can afford to show you spaceships at the same time that you hear the title, okay, fine, maybe I get that it's a sci-fi horror.
Whereas Prevenge is a great title because it absolutely conveys what the movie is. You have a pregnant stomach and a knife next to it. Okay, we get what this film we get. we know what we're watching. We go into that going, okay, have I got the stomach for this? Have I got, straight away, literally, if this is you or not of a kind of movie, it says what it is. Exactly. And it's so hard to get right. Getting your title right. The amount of titles on new scripts I've gone backwards and forwards with, whether it's myself or my co-writers or theirs writers and me as a director, is really, really difficult. And we talked about in the title as well. We touched on it before we started recording. I mentioned it at the beginning. We use it in so many of your films, Jan, so many of my films, your films as well, Stephen, all got in the title. It's whether it should or shouldn't. And I think it's just so hard as a filmmaker to know what to do, but just try and have it connect to the film you're making so that people go, okay, I get that film.
I think genuinely I did a chat with Rosie Fletcher years ago when she was still with at Total Film, and we talked about a couple of tests for a good title. You've got the phone test, which means you need to be able to say it on the telephone and not have to repeat yourself ever, because the number of times you're repeating yourself is not only just lost production time, but it's really frustrating, and it starts to make you realize this title isn't going to work. You need the buying a ticket test, which means that I can remember your title when I go up to the booth to actually buy the ticket, because the number of times people do a title, it's like, oh, like I remember this with Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, is people was like, oh, it's that mama one, the one with all the M names.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that ends up lacking longevity. And it is very simply the search engine optimization. And you need to be able to Google it and have it be what shows up. And let me tell you what, when you call a film The Borderlands, and there is a video game called The Borderlands, you are never finding that film in search engine optimization.
Well, hence why they changed the title in so
to
many
the final prayer.
Well, I wouldn't. If you're worried about SEO, I wouldn't worry too much about it, for example, which is possibly or us or anything like that. But I think sometimes you can get away with it if there is some kind of extra hidden piece of information. So if there can be a title that does all those other tests, but doesn't work in and of itself, but you need one more piece of information. I mean, my example I love is the film Teeth, which is such a great idea, because the basic idea is a vagina having teeth. Because
vagina dentata.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Because what it does then for you is it empowers in your head a million possibilities for you to think about. And then you're like, I wonder where they went with it. So it's like, it just you can walk around thinking about that movie without having seen that movie. And then you want to see how what they've taken on that theme.
This is 100% correct. I was going to say, if you're a filmmaker, and don't tell the person you're talking to about the film, just tell them, I'm making a horror film called XYZ. What do you think it's about? And I'll give you an example of this.
The alphabet.
Love
exactly. Alphabet killer. I don't know. The film I'm in development on at the moment, we're hoping to shoot next year, is called Cougar. Now, a horror film called Cougar, what does that conjure to mind?
Well,
I think
Courtney Cox is in it, right?
I mean, there you go. Yeah. Like, you know immediately where we're going with it and whether or not you would be interested in watching that. And the thing is, because you can get excited about what's in your head way more than you can get excited about me telling you what to expect, that by having an evocative title that doesn't confound your audience but gives them a taste of what you're going to provide them with, you have a successful title at that point.
Great. Let's talk about profitability within that then, and within these films, because it's so important. What films do make money, what don't? How do we do that? How do we go about it in terms of this horror report?
Well, I mean, we have to talk about the fact that there is something that we don't talk about enough in film, which is that film is an appallingly bad investment.
Really?
Like, it's just appalling. And we
don't tell my investors.
I know. But don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this. But like, if you're just starting with, I have some money, I'd like to continue having this money and maybe some more money on top, do not go anywhere near film. It's too unpredictable. And it's not consistent enough, and all sorts of things like that. However, there are things that
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, don't worry.
They've all switched off. No, don't switch off.
I told you, it's only the only people that are going to quit anyway that are switched off.
Exactly.
It's the people who don't listen to me. I know have really heard me. No, it's the
name of a new podcast.
Don't listen to me. I'll tell you the truth. Yeah. So, but if there are so many things that film can do that nothing else can do, it is art. It's a ride. It's a unique experience. People, the ROI on getting a yacht, playing golf, or having your name on a seat at the opera is zero. And this isn't zero. This is something. So there is already a space to be playing in. But then also, when we talk about profitability and we say that, let's say most films don't make money, it's not random. It's maybe not highly predictable, but it's also not random. There are your actions over the course of, say, 2 years from concept to big screen. Everything can have a possible difference. And more importantly, you can F it up on a number of ways with one deal. And so that's why we're talking about the exec producer. Sometimes it's just about not signing the one contract, not forgetting to get the one contract signed. Oh yeah, the lead actor, he hasn't signed, but he's promised he will, or whatever it would be. But so there is so many reasons to get involved with film, but they're not all exclusively money, like profitability. So what we should do is find people who have other reasons as well, and then spend so much time trying to make rational decisions that don't interfere with our art and our reason for making it. But that's all theory. I mean, Jen, do your films make money?
So funnily, the ones that I've sold do.
Oh, good.
But the really fascinating thing about that, I think, is that as a filmmaker, you should be paid to make your film, because the truth is you are not going to see anything else out of it. So if you take points if you want to take points, but be aware that they are not going to generate anything. Like, certainly take them if you want to cover yourself, but the odds of you getting money out of those, first off, your film actually has to sell, so that's hard to do. Then it has to perform, which is hard to do. Then it has to be accurately reported by the distributor how it performed. Then that money has to be paid to the production company dealing with the distributor. Then they have to claim profit. Then all of that has to happen, and you have to reach a certain financial threshold before any of that money will be realistic. And the fact is, there's usually a breakdown somewhere along that chain. I had a sales agent say to me recently that for films on their library that are over 4 years old, they don't even bother checking with distributors because it doesn't make financial sense for them to be sending and chasing for those reports all the time.
Wow.
So the reality of actually getting that money is slim. Now, your investors may see that money because you've got the tax credit, because here in the UK, you've got EIS and SEIS, because they're going to be first out. Because if you've got money from the BFI, that is effectively soft money, even though it's equity, and they're not relying on that money to come back for them to continue being investors. So there are, it goes into your lockbox as a producer. There are several situations in which your investors can see their money back that have nothing to do with your film going into profit. But the only way you see those points, or if the film goes into profit as defined, as agreed, according to the budget, with all of these caveats on it. So what I would say is, as a filmmaker, you need to make sure your investors get their money back, but do not count on you making money after the fact.
Yes.
Count on getting your fee, what your fee needs to be, and then the rest of it going forward. Make sure that you have control of your IP still, that you're licensing it to them, but that they can't sell it on and that you own it. Those are the two things you need to do as the creatives. What you need to do for the investors is make sure that you partner with a sales agent who they approve of, because it doesn't matter if they've, as long as they've approved, if the sales agent they've approved of is the one who doesn't make the sales, then at least everybody's been in on the same decision. And you need to make sure that your finance plan and your waterfall has you exploiting the film at every possible turn, which is what an exec producer can make sure you're doing, so that you're getting your tax credit, you're getting all the soft money you can, that you're making sure you file your VAT and you're not getting charged by HMRC for late filing and all that kind of boring stuff, but that you are getting a good deal with your sales agent and that they are getting good deals with the distributors. Because it doesn't, again, we've sort of said it doesn't actually matter whether or not you've made a good film. Making a commercially profitable film is a different animal entirely. And at the end of the day, you need someone who knows how money works, and you need someone who knows how to market your film. So if you can market it and you've got someone who knows how the money works, you can almost certainly make a commercially profitable horror film. If you and your friends are doing it without any idea of how to open a high interest bank account, then
don't expect to make a penny back.
Then how are you telling people that you're going to give them a return on their investment? Because you're going to make a really good film.
That's the really important thing. It's nothing wrong with not knowing this stuff. There's nothing wrong with not finding out if you don't want to. The problem only comes when you go to somebody else and tell them you do know. There's no shame in not knowing or not making money.
Totally agree.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
And I think one of the ways that the government could really help the British film industry is making it okay for some films not to make money, making it clear that, because the focus of all of these films is still under box office performance and how well it did and da-da-da-da. But the fact is that for a film to be worthwhile culturally, It's nothing to do with whether or not it's commercially profitable. For it to be valuable for someone to exercise their voice as a storyteller from unrepresented, yet to be heard from demographics. I heard a fantastic pitch the other day from a young woman who is making a film about women in Iran. And the fact is that these stories have never been told because the censors in Iran only want women depicted in a certain way in their cinema. So is that a hugely commercially viable film? Not really. It's Iranian language. It's made by a first-time filmmaker. It's predominantly a drama. However, is this a hella important film to get made that is deeply important for people to watch and to engage with? 100%. So I know the podcast focuses around the business of film. The business of film is messy and very few people control the outcomes. And it's not the filmmakers. There's a hell of a lot more reasons to make a film than making a commercially successful film. It's just unfortunate that we have to put on this mask
ill-fitting suit
of capitalism.
I think of it like a small child wearing a big, like, you know, like a suit. Yeah, playing business with like, I'm businessman, and the tie's too big, the suitcases are falling open.
And this is the thing, like, for me as a filmmaker, I love making films. I love developing stories. I love presenting those stories on screen. I love the edit. I love sound mix. I love making films. And it's one of the reasons I'm directing more than producing now. I know how the finance works. I do not enjoy it. I do not have any fun. I get no, and I think there must be people who do. And if you're out there, please come help me finance my films. But there must be people who genuinely thrive on those financial conversations and encouraging people to invest. But I don't think they're the same people who develop incredibly interesting dimensional characters. I think they're necessary partnerships in the...
It's a different mindset. And you're so right, Jen, in terms of what you said there. It's so important, all of that stuff you talked about with getting your film sold, made, understanding it all. And as Stephen says, there's no shame in not knowing. None of us knew when we first started what the hell we were doing. We just kind of jumped into it and learnt along the way. If you can learn before, oh my gosh, it'll help you massively. And yes, I think there is different mindsets within a film world, and it's great to try and partner with the right people. It's so difficult. Interestingly, I know quite a few sales and distributors who will literally give an MG based on a poster. Not seen the film, probably never watched it, probably never watched the trailer.
It doesn't matter if it's good. It matters how clear the poster is.
I can sell that poster. And do you know what? That poster is so important because it's the first thing you see on any of the platforms. And you go, no, based on the poster, which is why it's so important, just to jump back on that. Stephen, just going to you on this then, in terms of where best should horror films go? You know, in terms of as a filmmaker, you go, great, I finished my film. Where do I put it? Do you put it on streaming?
Well, you're about a year and a half late on that question. Because
I know.
that is exactly the journey most people take, which is I've finished my film, now what?
Exactly.
And that's really hard on a few fronts because maybe you've recruited people at the beginning, whether it's financially or on board the journey, that don't necessarily, that you've made promises and you don't know how to fulfill them. But also there's things like film festivals, whether it's timing, which film festivals you're going to apply to. It's even more important with horror because most traditional film festivals aren't very horror friendly, but there are a plethora of really friendly ones. Like it's its own little bubble. And then also all this distribution stuff we're talking about. So on the other hand, you can't just make a film. I know I'm going to make a film in 2 years for this streaming platform who'll pay me this much money, because even the streaming platforms don't know that's the case. And they certainly wouldn't tell you because they keep changing their strategies. But you do have to have a sense of the types of audiences that are going to watch this. And horror has a narrower profile of audience than most genres, in the sense that it has the lowest proportion of kids of any genre and the lowest proportion of people over 45. So it is in that narrow sort of 20s and 30s. So you can understand who is going to watch it, comparable films. And as you get closer to completing it, you should get a much clearer idea of who you should be going to talk to and what they might want to do. And you can have all sorts of journeys. Like there's horror films that have been intended for theatrical release, but then bought by a streamer. Sometimes they've been re-edited, or they might be that they go to a niche site like Shudder or something like that. But it's you understanding your core audience and then keeping 2/3 of an eye, I was going to say half an eye, but 2/3 of an eye on who is out there buying and selling certain kinds of films, and then approaching people with enough time that you can be sort of flexible with this stuff. If you've spent every single penny you have in post, it's all locked, you've done the picture lock before you show it to anyone in the industry, you probably can't take on any advice. And ideally you get a couple of bits of really good, quick advice that you could do something about. But, it's you can't plan fully in advance and you can't wait right to the end. It's sort of a journey between the two, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And it's, I think, really the way that films that do get released, especially independent films that haven't been developed internally by these places, the way that these films get released is that so with Cougar, we presented in May at the Cannes Film Festival in the Frontiers Finance Market. We presented alongside, I think, 9 other films. We started generating interest there, got some cast attachments. We've just presented at the Production Finance Market for London Film Festival. So what is that? That's 4 months later, something like that. We're not planning to make the film until next year, but we are talking to sales agents and distributors now about making those deals so that we can make the film. And I think that's that difference of the executive producer. If you haven't been an executive producer or don't know how to work with an executive producer, you wouldn't know that you're supposed to have those conversations before you lock in your cast. Because, again, we talk a lot about cast being something you can do, that you can make horror films with or without that cast. But the fact is, if you don't have the cast, then nobody's going to buy your film until they see the finished thing. And they're going to decide then whether it's good or not. And that's a lot of eggs in that basket. So ultimately, exactly as Stephen said, if you want your film to be a theatrical film, then you need to be having those conversations before you have day one of pre-production. If you want to just make the best damn independent film you can, then you start talking to film festivals in the post-production process and start asking them if somebody would be willing to watch a promo or a trailer or a screener, or you release a trailer on your YouTube channel or your, whatever that kind of buzz you want to build there. But if it's a theatrical film, you're too late. If it's a creative masterpiece, then you're only a little too late and you need to get your butt in gear. And hopefully before that, you'd been attending, volunteering, having short films at those festivals so that you're not just starting that relationship cold.
Love that. It's so important. Yeah, if you want to do this horror world, turn up at Fright Fest. You've got to be there. You've got to know who the audience is. You've got to be friends with them, or even just generally say hello, show your face. It's really important. I think people do just jump in and go, oh, well, I'm here too, Fright Fest or Dead Northern. Why aren't you watching my film? Well, they probably are, but they don't know who you are. Whereas if they know who you are or they've been around, it might make a difference. Your film still has to cut the mustard, obviously, but yeah, it does make a difference.
I would almost say actually the relationship is more important than the quality of the film at that stage. And that's it's I think the fact of the matter is it's upsetting how small a part the quality of the film actually plays. But I think what filmmakers can take from that is be aware that the success of your film is not based on its quality, which means the success of your film is not a judgment of its quality. But you do have to be aware of these other factors and these trends that Stephen's documented and investigated here. And by the way, I think he's presented them in a way that makes them so readable. It's like I could genuinely just sit there and scroll through it and pick it up and put it back down. I think it's a genuinely enjoyable, accessible read. So I don't want people thinking that it's just a really dry presentation of facts and figures. But yeah, if you don't have an executive producer, these are the algorithms that they're thinking about. These are the trends that they're thinking about. Obviously it's not going to reflect the minutia of your own finance plan, but if you can be aware of this stuff, then at least you can make a pretty good case for your film.
And I think, it's absolutely true what you said about the quality and the success being, not being the measure of the quality. And if you're unsure about whether that feels true or not, look at the movies that are being distributed and offered to you. Are they the best ones?
Really? Ask yourself.
Yeah,
ask yourself.
In the same way,
made one of them.
Is this my beautiful horror film?
Exactly.
The politicians we have in power, are these the best people? Or is the system not really about finding the best people, and is the system that we have for distribution not about finding just purely the best films? And I think then you can go, oh, so there's at least more at play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this again is another reason to go to festivals, because then you get to see the difference between the films that are being handed to you by the commercial marketplace versus the films that exist.
Yeah. So true. And often they're not hand in hand. The horror movie report is out now, by the way. Link to it is in the show notes.
Can I share just that this is apropos of nothing else. This is just brings me so much joy. A fact I discovered in doing this research, and I had to check it because it was so joyous to me, at least. Because I was reading up about the biography of some of the directors, and the director of the 1953 film House of Wax, which was a big 3D horror film in sort of one of the big booms of 3D, only had one working eye, and so had no depth perception. And like, it's just a lovely fact. Like, it's just
it speaks to the truth of the industry. Yeah. It's sort of like.
He lost vision in his eye, one of his eyes as a kid. And so, it still did very well as a 3D movie. I just thought it was a fun fact.
That is a really fun fact. Liz, thank you so much, both of you, Stephen Follows and Jen Handorf, for joining us on this very special edition of The Business of Film, talking horror movie and horror movies and why they do well, why they don't. And it's a huge report. Should we tell them how many pages there is? Do you think that'll put them off? Because there is a wonderful amount of pages. Should we just go with that? But as Jen says, it's thorough. And you can, if that particular chapter is not for you, you can go to the next one. Just because there's so much info here that it can't hurt you as a filmmaker to be looking at this. It just can't. And by the way, and all of Stephen's stuff on stephenfollows.com, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well done, Stephen. This is a labour of love here, and it's honestly incredible. I'm blown away by it. And I learned so much as well. I was like, oh, okay, all right. Don't put that in the title.
Well, it was really fun to put together, partly because, horror is fun, but also because it is the kind of deep work that happens in other industries where there is more money. Finance is not underanalyzed, but we don't do enough of it in film. So it's really fun to look at stuff that I think in some cases other people haven't looked at, but it's especially fun to be able to come back and go, look what I found, because I can see how other people will use it and go on to make their projects more likely to happen or be more successful by however they define that. And that's really, like, we're all part of a community. So I feel like I'm doing my bit. This is the bit I can do, and I can then put it to the community, and then they go off and do other cool things with it.
Absolutely. Jen, is there a place where people can follow you? Is there something you want to discuss?
I'm on jenniferhandorf.com. It's the benefit of a unique name. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well. Instagram for the creative stuff, Twitter for the questions. I do try and reply over there, even though it's a cesspool.
It isn't.
Absolutely. And you can always reach out to me via my website.
There you go. Thank you so much for listening. You can go out there and make your horror film, know your genre, know what film you're trying to make, do the work early, think about the business side behind it, think about the title, think about the marketplace, think about who would want to see your film, and maybe try and get a start in it, especially if you want theatrical. This has been incredible. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you very much, Stephen Follows.
Thank you very much for having me back, and it's been so much fun.
It really has. Thank you very much, Jennifer Handorf.
Thanks for having me. Great first time.
If you're lucky enough to rise up and do well, it is your duty to
send the elevator back down.
We will see you all next Tuesday. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.